The soul has long been called many things: the font of our compassion, the source of our will, the container of our life force. But even now, the true function of it is unknown. Get comfortable, everyone. This one's gonna be a doozy. There are a lot of theories roaming around tackling the ideas that the red soul in Kris is the same one as Chara's, Frisk's, Gaster's experiment, or a combination of those things. Today, I'm attempting to reach a satisfying, evidence-based conclusion to the question, what the heck is going on with human souls? Just to preface this, I'm gonna draw conclusions based on Chara's human description, but I'm also gonna gather information from the being at the end of the genocide run, because they are presumably the essence of Chara's identity, minus the soul. The first thing that we need to tackle is the appearances of the three. Kris's and Frisk's sprites have the same hair and skin color, different from Chara's. Kris and Chara both have a green blouse with a yellow stripe, colors in direct opposition with Frisk's clothes. For more info, see my previous video. Also, when Kris goes to a dark world, their color palette changes to magenta and blue, and since Susie's skin color and clothes don't change that drastically from purple to pink, and Noelle's and Birdley's skin colors stay the same, it might be interesting to look into. Their sprites' colors are eerily similar to Frisk's. Also, both Kris and Frisk wear bandages as armor in the beginning. Whether Chara also wore a bandage previously is unknown, but they probably wore the heart locket later on. There is a line that I find particularly interesting. In Kris's room made by Ralsei, the description says, "There are many clothes. You could wear whatever you want." Now, this may be interpreted in a few ways. 1. Kris doesn't have in real life a lot of diversity in clothes. This may be the case since their part of the room is pretty barren in the light world. 2. Kris is being forcefully made to wear clothes similar to Chara's, either by Toriel or by possession. This also may be true, especially because we see both Chara and Asriel wear green and yellow striped shirts. Chara is presumed to have brown eyes because of the sprites shown in the genocide run. While that is a valid interpretation, something that always irked me was the fact that their eyes seemingly melt alongside their face. While that may just be an artistic choice, take a look at their sprites' outline color. The fact that they are the same makes me question if, by any chance, Chara's eye sockets are actually empty. Frisk's eye color is heavily debated, and for good reason. Are glowing red eyes natural or a sign of possession? Well, the glowing part can easily be solved, since there are multiple instances where we encounter glowing eyes, like when fighting Undyne or Asgore, indicating determination, power, or something along the line. The tricky part is analyzing the unnaturally red hue. Frisk's eyes are only shown in the soulless pacifist ending, so there is a possibility that their natural eye color isn't red. When we see Frisk's eyes, their facial expression changes to Chara's, or at the very least, the demon. I find it peculiar, because they only have red eyes in a set of tarot cards. The card was modified before selling it, changing the character's eyes from dark holes to red lines, just like we see with Frisk. Now, the card does not specifically say whether it's the fallen human or the demon portrayed, since the crossed out name says fallen. Still, the card is quote-unquote the devil, and we see them grabbing the red soul, so it may be indicative of possessing it. Kris's eyes are shown in multiple instances. When they're taking out their soul at the end of chapter 1, they have white eyes. When they have their soul taken out, their eyes are glowing red. When falling into the dark world with the soul inside them, they again have red eyes. So we cannot say that their eye color is inherently tied to the presence or absence of the red soul. Now, could the white eyes in the beginning be a red herring, so as to make the Chara-esque reveal hit harder? Maybe, but it would mess up with a lot of people's interpretations, and I personally don't think Toby would implement such a cheap trick into one of the most debated scenes in the game, especially as a conclusion to his passion project. So, what can we conclude from this? Well, not much. There is evidence supporting both sides, but not enough on either to sway people in only one direction. Not yet, at least. When we look at the characters' personalities, there are a few instances that stand out. Kris and Chara both love chocolate and seem to be, in Kris's case at least, distant towards humanity. While not super apparent, it seems like Kris's nature is more towards Frisk's non-violent one than Chara's sadistic one. For more information or evidence, see Iluminate's videos about it. Though both Kris and Chara wield knives, Kris doesn't use it as a weapon, but rather as a tool to cut pie and slash tires. They seem genuinely attached to people like Asriel and Susie, and their pranks are not meant to hurt anyone. In the Dark World, from what we can deduce from the text, I would be inclined to believe that they do not wish harm on anyone. The only person they feel an apparent disdain for is Ralsei, something I might tackle in another video. When gathering all data about humans' characterization, a very interesting conclusion begins to emerge. If we assume that in Undertale, the two main humans leading the two main endings of the game are a representation of good and evil, then in Deltarune, those two states of being collide into a more complex and intricate character. When adding up Kris's both physical and personality traits, it is clear that they are an amalgamation, pun intended, of Frisk and Chara. They have Frisk's hair and eye color and their altruistic, non-violent tendencies, but Chara's fashion, tool, and food preferences, as well as their sometimes creepy mannerisms and human disdain. It honestly makes a lot of sense now, while Deltarune may only have one ending, because you're not dealing with two opposing forces, but a multi-dimensional character. While you are able to manipulate them into being more good or evil, they may have enough agency to end the game by their own will, something that we actually have seen happening in the first two chapters. By the way, I don't necessarily believe that Frisk and Chara are solely the essence of good and evil, but more so that their tendencies, characterization, and representative endings are hitting towards that dichotomy. If you want to know more about my rationale regarding this topic, see my previous video. Now that we've analyzed the surface of Kris's, Frisk's, and Chara's connection, as well as drawing some thematic parallels, let's get speculative into the nitty-gritty of it. How do these forces interact with one another? When playing Undertale for the first time, you're asked to quote-unquote name the fallen human. The screen turns white and you are presented with, surprise surprise, a fallen human. Aside from subverting expectations later on in a pacifist route, this moment has been deemed by some as a summoning of the first fallen human in the underground, Chara. Not only are you mimicking their fall and calling their name, but you're literally landing on their burial site, a bed of golden flowers. And speaking of golden flowers, when falling later on in the game, in a waterfall, a bed of flowers breaks your fall again, and you're greeted with a flashback to the Dreamer children first time meeting. Many people have theorized that the flowers grew there because of the seeds sticking to Alphys, who spent a lot of time staring into the abyss. The fact that the seeds would have had Asriel's dust or essence and that the song played is quote-unquote his theme makes me think that either this is his memory, not Chara's, and that the recurring falling down scene may just be poetic, or the memory is Chara's, triggered by Flowey or Asriel. What is clearly Chara's memory is the game over dialogue, a continuation of one of the True Labs VHS tapes, and also when Frisk is sleeping in Asriel's bed in Toriel's house. We know that Chara gets awoken more and more when increasing stats, but they are obviously present from the beginning, regardless of the numbers increasing. What if I told you that Chara is actually inherently tied to your soul from the second you start the game? Take a look at your stats. There you will see, clear as day, Chara is the one holding your LV, HP, gold, and everything else. Now, could this just be a design choice? Sure, but it makes so much sense and it would be such an awesome detail if done on purpose. Not only that, Flowey ends up believing that Frisk is Chara regardless of the stats increasing. When doing genocide, they figure it out sooner because of their growing similarities, but in the pacifist run, they end up confusing the two, almost at the end. As a weird side note, the name you chose for Chara doesn't appear in the first encounter with Flowey or in the Genocide New Home monologue, but I'm not quite sure what to make of it. So, if Chara is presumed to be attached to our stats and their memories resonate within us, what else could there be a manifestation of the spirit? One of the most popular theories regarding the character is that they are the narrator of Undertale and possibly even Deltarune. Now, this is not confirmed by any means, and it does have some plot holes, mainly their relative omniscience, for example, reading monsters' feelings and stats, and personality and manner of speech discrepancies. Aside from the obvious lines delivered by Chara in a no mercy run, like quote-unquote "it's me, Chara" or quote-unquote "my bed," there are also some oddities in a neutral or pacifist run, alluding to Chara at least influencing the narration. The mean jokes at Snowy, Washia's quote-unquote dirty jokes, the comments regarding Chara's bed, serious mode in the Dreamer battles, and many more. Regardless if you believe Chara is the only narrator or not, you have to admit that they do at least have some control when it comes to the information provided, gaining more agency if you pursue the murderous path. And speaking of it, let's see what that path has in store for us. The scene in which we encounter them is very different from the rest of the game. Pure emptiness, just a small child looking at you. The instances in which the word "you" are capitalized in game are always supported by meta undertones, and considering that Frisk is nowhere to be present, it is either that their speech is directed at the player, or it is a limbo state of a battle scene. Seeing that there is no red soul representation, I'm gonna go with the former. Moving forward with this in mind, the human soul and determination that allowed the game's progression is revealed to be something external, brought by or given to the player. Considering that Chara pretends to be the one in control, literally cutting contact between player and game, they still can't seem to get a hold of your soul. Even if you give them that, on a second playthrough, the soul is still in your control, even after a second genocide run. I'm not gonna go too far into the implications of this because we need to acknowledge the practicality and replayability aspect of not having the tool to actually play the game. This is something Toby Fox actually contemplated on doing, as seen in the code written if you get the Chara death screen. Still, there is one key aspect I think is intentional. Let us erase this pointless world and move on to the next. While the next world could mean another Undertale timeline, the fact that Chara says there is a reason to recreate this world when talking about another genocide timeline implies that they refer to something outside of Undertale, considering the fact that every iteration of the game is its own timeline, including pursuing multiple murder routes. The Deltarune intro sequence is as obnoxious as it is confusing. The red soul summoned by what is presumably another him, aka Gaster, has more or less the same properties as in Undertale: to save reloaded shiny checkpoints, to do various actions in battle, to break, to change functionality and color, and it is obviously the same base color, red. It is pretty much set in stone that certain colors are indicative of certain traits. Not sure how that affects battle sprites, but either way, like orange symbolizing bravery and so on. Red, the color that doesn't have a definitive answer, is speculated to be along the lines of either determination or love, and I think it is determination because of this little chart that I made. Arranging the souls based on the colors of the rainbow, it's easy to see that the traits blend into each other like their representative hues. For example, a common adjective adjacent to justice and patience would be kindness, or between perseverance and patience is integrity. Following that, the common trait between perseverance and bravery would be determination. I know the words described have a lot up to interpretation, but I still think I'm on the right track. Now, don't go assuming that just because Chara had a red soul, it means that they could control timelines. That power still came from the player. I'm just saying that it may be indicative of one's main character traits. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's tackle the big question. Are there multiple red souls, one for each human, or is it only one? Well, I would love to sit here and tell you that Chara's soul somehow was transported back to their body after Asriel's death, and Frisk absorbed it, something that is heavily implied to not be possible. I can't in good faith do that, because the evidence is lackluster at best. For now, it's best to assume that the soul is either Frisk's or the player's in Undertale, and Chara just has an influence on it. It would be cool if it was the same though. This doesn't mean, however, that the soul you control in Deltarune isn't the one from Undertale. Aside from the obvious similarities regarding the color and determination-induced abilities, like saving and loading, the narrative meaning of looking at the soul, and implicitly the player's involvement in the development of these worlds, as a unitary, continuous anomaly in the universe of these games, is a rather overlooked aspect in analyzing Deltarune. Let's put it into perspective. If you play Undertale for the first time, you're probably gonna get a neutral ending, since it is required for the true pacifist, and most players wouldn't work their butts off grinding until genocide. The game heavily encourages players to spare and befriend everyone, Flowey explicitly telling you of a better outcome. So you reach the true pacifist ending, everybody is happy. Now what? Again, Flowey hints at it. Reset everything, something you couldn't do before, and search for secrets and Easter eggs. Maybe by chance, maybe through searching on the internet, you trigger the genocide playthrough. Even though you now kill and destroy everyone you once befriended, you keep pushing to achieve true completion. And the game is aware. Sans, Flowey, Asgore, Chara all point it out. Now your game is forever tainted with that quote-unquote perverted sentimentality. Now, there is truly nothing else. Let us erase this pointless world and move on to the next. This game's progression isn't only hinted by the game, but also in other instances. For example, the original soundtrack's order precisely follows the chronological neutral route STs, moving on to the pacifist ones and ending with the genocide ones and ultimately Good Night. The fact that the orchestral concert stuck to this order, even though from an enjoyment perspective it would have been better to end with the pacifist songs, is greatly hinting at a deeper meaning. Okay, so I don't know where else to put it, but the menu song after beating Deltarune Chapter 1 is called Before the Story, and it's the same song for the Undertale dynamic theme on PS4. Knowing Toby Fox, a man who made full songs over a bird carrying you around for 3 inches, or to troll snoopers in a possible Sans fight, I'm pretty sure this wasn't done out of laziness. Considering that the PS4 version of Undertale came out a bit over a year before Deltarune, it's safe to assume that he was already working on Chapter 1. Why do I bring this up? Well, if you listen to the song, you'll notice something important. The main motif in this song is not something Deltarune related. In fact, there is no motif from this game in this song. The theme playing is the main one from Undertale, usually called after the first song from the game, Once Upon a Time. Other song titles from Undertale's OST are called Finale, An Ending, and, as I said previously, Good Night. Now, I'm not quite sure what concrete conclusion to draw from this, but I think this alludes to the fact that Undertale is, in a metaphorical sense, a bedtime story. Still, going back to Deltarune, this track is another indicator that the worlds of these games are more connected than we think. So I previously said that Chara can't really take your soul when playing Undertale, but looking at it through the lens of moving on to the next world, it starts to make sense. Regardless of who is speaking to us in the beginning, it is clear that the soul connected is from another realm. Not only that, but a very familiar and peculiar way of speaking cuts the first speaker off and introduces us to the realm of Deltarune in, again, a very familiar and peculiar way. Before anyone comments, yes, I do think that there are 2 distinct voices in the intro. They differ in font, word captioning, Japanese speaking styles, background, intention behind the vessel creation, basically everything. Even Sans still kept his font and manner of speaking when they're staring at us. Another thing I want to touch on is the debate around the pronouns used in this game. Don't worry, not that kind of pronouns. In both Undertale and Deltarune, the pronoun you is used to sometimes refer to the humans, sometimes to us, the players. While in Undertale it was used as a subversion of expectations later on, this doesn't really apply to Deltarune. In the same breath that supposedly Chara says your choices don't matter, it says your name is Chris. The way that I interpret it is that as far as the normal, non-meta game is concerned, you really are Chris, because you are operating within the confines of their body and abilities, and are barely restricted by the little control they have over their self. It is redundant to differentiate all the time between you two, because they are your actions, your body, your soul. Also, it would kinda go against the grain to constantly say, Chris did X, Y, and Z. It would detach you from the consequences of your own actions. At times that are important to make that distinction, like the end of the Snowgrave route, where it's clear that Noelle is more or less directly under the player's control, the narration complies and uses second person to refer to us and third person to Chris. If this video didn't get speculative enough, it's guesser time! I'm not gonna touch on everything regarding Mystery Man today. There are way more comprehensive analyses regarding this topic. I'm just gonna focus on the things related to Deltarune's world as a whole and its influence over the soul. We're all probably familiar with entry number 17 and the fact that what is most likely to be Gaster is very interested in the quote-unquote next experiment regarding an impossible level of darkness. The same peculiar manner of speech is displayed when presenting Deltarune to the public, under a redacted name of 6 letters. So it is pretty clear that Gaster, or at least part of him, seeped into the real world as well. The fact that he says that we are quote-unquote on the verge of connection and then asking us, are we connected, in the Deltarune intro just strengthens this reality bend. As a side note, the first tweet in the series references a black wind, which is the ambient sound played when choosing to spare or kill Flowey, or, most importantly, when choosing to give your soul to Chara, reiterates the fact that there is a deeper connection between the two realities. One strange thing that always bugged me was the intro song's name, Another Hymn. It contains Gaster's theme as a motif, known in the files as muse_st_hymn, and Gaster is always thought to be referred as the man, him, and strictly masculine nouns and pronouns, so it is pretty clear who it is alluding to. But the term another would imply that this Gaster, the one talking to us, is not the same one from Undertale, lost in the time-space continuum. So because Alphys made Flowey long after Gaster disappeared, and he was the first known being to mess with the timelines, therefore not contributing to Gaster's narrative arc, the only reasonable explanation would be that Deltarune also has a Mystery Man. This would explain who built the bunker that plays a slowed version of Gaster's theme, but it wouldn't explain why the lost Gaster from Undertale talked about Dark Worlds. Or would it? See, there technically are 2 entry number 17s. One is the Gaster one, but the other is written in the same manner as the rest, continuing Alphys' determination research. Notice the fact that her entry displays the number, while Gaster's is spelled out. We know that the concept of Deltarune precedes even Undertale's, and Toby added on the Deltarune website the entry's experiment part years before announcing the game. So maybe, just maybe, the whole Gaster entry was a red herring. Everything about it points to be out of place, and the fact that his experiment is clearly referring to Deltarune just puts the nail in the coffin. I personally wouldn't love the idea of the whole world of Deltarune to be a big experiment, but I think that Gaster studying these Dark World anomalies to be a good explanation regarding everything we know so far. The last thing I want to touch on regarding this godforsaken character is, why the hell are we in a dark fountain? The background in the psychedelic intro sequence is the same moving sprite used in the Dark Fountains. And also, what is a dark fountain? The most reasonable explanation would be a limbo state between the light and dark worlds. But if so, where would the intro Dark Fountain be located? The castle town? Possibly. Or even more confusing, is it a dark fountain, or is it just a perpetual limbo state that characters like Gaster, and possibly whatever Chara is, can inhabit? If the connection to the soul is done through this realm, does this realm connect different realities as well? Unfortunately, while it is fun to speculate, the lack of concrete proof regarding anything will probably leave this question in the air for some time. Regardless of who made it, who gets to control it and to what extent, in what realms it operates and influences, the soul is just a tool for you to gain access, power, and ultimately control over this other world. It is the thing that not only ties your world and the games together, but also the themes and maybe plotline of Undertale and Deltarune. While Toby's debut disguised heavier topics through a fairy tale lens, his sophomore piece of work is more overt in its approach, distinguishing real-life problems from its magical counterpart. This way, even the characters from Hometown get to exert control over the darkness, just like you, the player, can influence, manipulate, befriend, toss aside, and treat them like objects, like means to an end. To make Deltarune's ending out of your control wouldn't make the journey pointless, but it would leave out room for a little self-reflection. Now, I am not here to tell you how or if you should play a video game about imaginary monsters and even more imaginarily dark monsters, But I personally think that your enjoyment can be amplified if you really connect with these characters. If you believe that you really are fighting for control over a human's body. If you do think that this world is a chance for redemption over the last you destroyed. If you really believe that somebody's watching you. Anyways, that was my long and convoluted analysis on an array of different topics vaguely connected by what I personally consider to be the soul of Undertale and Deltarune. Any inputs and additional evidence for or against my ideas would be nice. I like bouncing off ideas as long as it is done respectfully and amicably. Subscribe if you want to see more. I have some other projects I'm currently working on, and I hopefully see you next time.